Hi, welcome to my podcast, Help Me Rhonda. I'm your host, Dr. Rhonda Karg. I'm a clinical psychologist, and each episode of this podcast, I share information with you in hopes that you'll gain insight into your own behavior and also learn new skills and tools that will help you to improve your mental health. And sometimes I also have guests on the show that share their experience, their strength, their hope with the audience in hopes of maybe giving you ideas about things that you can try in order to improve your mental health. So today I have a very special guest. Her name is Kailin Bouse, and she's joining me today. If you noticed that she has the same last name as a former guest of mine, Derek Bouse, and she has also a very inspirational story to share with us today. So, Kailin, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad that you're here today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I think it's amazing what you're doing on this podcast for people and just sharing that information and showing, real people and real faces that are relatable to others so that we can see that we're all kind of in this together.
Yes, agreed. I like that. Thank you.
So my name is Kailin Bouse. I'm 30 years old. I live in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I am a certified yoga and meditation instructor. I'm also a Reiki practitioner, which is a form of energy healing, the master level at that. And then I'm also a sound healer. So I use sound and vibrational tones and different types of music and instruments to help bring healing to the mind, body, and spirit. And today I'm really excited to just get into a little bit of all of those healing modalities and how they help people with trauma. I am a person that has suffered trauma myself, which I think all of us are to some degree. And that's really what started my journey into all of these types of alternative or holistic healing modalities, because I wasn't having much success with some of the more popular or, Western types of healing. I did find, some help, but it felt like it just wasn't enough. I needed some more type of help to get through some of the things I was going through. So, as you had mentioned, my father, Derek, who I love dearly and is a huge inspiration to me. If you watched his episode here, he discussed how he suffered a very debilitating physical accident when he was a teenager. And that was before I was born, that he had this accident. He ended up becoming a double amputee in a wheelchair due to a car accident. And his brother was killed in that car accident as well. So my dad had suffered a really, really life-changing trauma before I even was a thought or existed. So after that, my father and my mother had actually dated in high school, like before this had happened. And I guess a year or so after the accident, my mom had heard about it and she reached out to my dad. And they met up, and I guess it was like romance and, connection again. And I think it was like 3 months after rekindling, they were like, let's have a baby. And here I am.
Yay! Yay, what a great decision that turned out to be. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think, my mom suffered a lot of trauma herself as a child, and I think reconnecting, my parents unfortunately are no longer together now, but they're definitely still friends, and we still have a great family atmosphere. But I think for both of them, rekindling that relationship after they both had been through so much in life brought a lot of healing. And I think, love and connection and bringing life into the world was something that they, that was healing to them. So I was born um, but there were some harsh realities for me as a kid, you know, being born to a parent that had a physical disability, especially out where we grew up, was the middle of nowhere, very small town. And my dad as well is part of African American descent, which you can't tell as much within my skin tone, but was not the common thing where I was from either. So not only did I have a father that, you know, was physically handicapped and in a wheelchair, but he also had brown skin. So for kids, you know, sometimes, you know, they don't understand differences, or they're unfortunately taught that these differences are bad. So I, you know, suffered a lot of, you know, getting picked on as a kid, and also just a lot of like realities that a lot of kids don't have to face. You know, from a very small age, I understood that there was death. I understood that my uncle had died, you know, that my dad had lost his legs in an accident, and things like that, that just were big, lofty things to kind of experience and understand as a small child, which I think, you know, not on purpose, there's no way to control this, but it made me at a small age understand that the world wasn't necessarily safe, you know, that there were bad things that could happen, or traumas that could happen. And so I think I developed a sense of anxiety as a child, just from kind of that understanding, you know, and also, like, I saw how things were harder for my dad, even though my dad completely like didn't let it phase him at all. I had this like deep pit and wound in my heart to know that something so tragic happened to someone that I loved so deeply. And I think just growing up with just being faced with a lot of harsh truths very early, started to just have me look at the world in a way that I feel like I had to grow up really fast. And then growing up as an adolescent girl is difficult on top of all of that. You know, I physically developed a lot earlier than a lot of my peers. And, you know, I was, which I wouldn't have known then, but I do realize now, I was sexually harassed a lot, and just, you know, young boys and not understanding what is right and not right, to how to treat other women or young girls. So there was a lot of confusion and things along that end. And I ended up, you know, kind of getting mixed in with the wrong people. And I just was dealing with a lot of pain that I didn't know how to process. And we were talking a little bit before, you know, ancestral trauma. You know, I didn't just have my trauma, but I came into this world with the understanding and energy of the trauma of my parents as well, which it was a heavy load to carry because there was nothing I could do about it. And it was just difficult to accept that, you know, these hard and really, you know, traumatizing things happened to people that I loved, you know. And then having to see both my parents struggle with their own traumas in their own ways, because they're human too. I think it just put a lot of pressure on me as a kid, and I ended up kind of falling into a depression and anxiety. And then there was a phase where I just literally hated everything. And I was dealing with so many strong emotions that I didn't know how to process. And I ended up turning to self-harm. So I was a self-harmer for many years. I cut myself and would do different types of, you know, physical kind of pain to myself. Because I think at that time, it took my mental focus away from something that was causing me emotional pain to something that caused physical pain, which was much easier to deal with than kind of the emotional pain, because I didn't understand like how to process that, where physical pain kind of can bring you out of that. So I was struggling with that. I was struggling with mental health, lots of kind of emotional breakdowns, and not being able to go to school because I was just so emotionally kind of unregulated. It ended up in a few hospitalizations in psychiatric hospitals. I had every diagnosis kind of in the book at that time, and as the more kind of diagnoses that started happening, it kind of, in a weird way, instead of helping me, seemed to make me kind of spiral more, because I was like, okay, I'm just crazy.
Right.
you know,
Sure.
which is
Sure.
difficult because that's not the goal, in these situations. But I think with children, you have to be so careful before jumping into certain medications or certain diagnoses, because I
Mm-hmm.
think we're still developing, and it actually ends up altering our development based upon kind of what we're told. So um,
Mm-hmm.
I through all this, I was in a really actual terrible car accident with a bunch of my friends as a child.
Mm.
My best friend almost passed away, but she was saved at the time. So that put in a big PTSD trauma as well. Just another thing, like, the world is not safe. The world is not safe. You are
Right.
not safe.
Yeah. Right.
Anything can happen. So this is where, turns into what I realize now is my nervous system was just completely overstimulated, over heightened. And I'll talk a little bit about how that actually happens in the body. But because of this, I was in a constant stress response and seeking and doing anything, whether it be cutting or drugs or whatever, just to make myself feel like numbed
Right.
out from that overstimulation and from that
Mm-hmm.
internal message of you're not safe and things aren't good. So I ended up moving to New Jersey with a new best friend that I had made. That car accident was about 13. About 18, I got out of one of the mental hospitals. I think I was in three, between the ages of like 15 and 18. And I moved to New Jersey with my friends. And we moved in with my cousin. And at this point was when I started to really kind of like clean my act up. It was a new place, new territory, kind of a new start. And I stopped, self-harming. I stopped using drugs. I got a job. I was doing well in my job. I got promoted. I met a boy. And throughout all that, my best friend moved back to Pennsylvania. I ended up moving in with the family of my partner at the time. And I ended up staying with him for about 7 years. And through that time, my best friend, who had moved to New Jersey with me, I got a call one day at 20 years old that she had passed away in her sleep.
Oh.
So that was just a huge obvious trauma for me. It was kind of a freak accident. She overdosed on Benadryl, which is
Wow.
yeah, not purposely. She must have took too much, and she went to bed, and the toxicity of it just stopped her heart. So that's what happened.
Mm.
So I had just started to kind of get better, and then that happened. And fortunately, it didn't knock me completely backwards, but it definitely just caused more trauma in my life. And I actually started developing physical pain in my body at this point,
Mm.
which was very chronic back pain. I could barely sleep in a bed. I had to lay on a floor because, from what I think I understand, is eventually psychosomatically your body starts to seize up, from trauma and stress.
Right.
So
Mm.
I wasn't getting much help from doctors. You know what I mean? They tried their best. Pain medications, this, that. I didn't want to take that. And so that's when I started to looking into other things. And that's where I started looking into yoga. And after one or two yoga classes, I started to feel so much relief in my physical pain and my ability to actually just be present in the present moment. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had been working on this for so long, and I was so intrigued on how and why this actually helped me. So a couple years went by. I was practicing just as a student. I had some other, things happen in my life. That relationship ended. I started a new relationship with a man named Daniel. And we had went to school together back in the day, kind of rekindled over the internet. And our relationship was just beautiful. He was a very spiritual person, and I was getting into spirituality. And I had decided that I was going to go get my yoga teaching license. So I actually moved to a yoga ashram, which is like a yoga school, pretty much, where you live and work and serve at this place. And in return, you get your yoga education. So I had a marketing and administration background. So when I moved there, I was the head of marketing for the digital marketing. I was doing the social media and things like that. And then I was able to get my yoga education for free. So I studied, and I actually lived there 2.5 years doing this residency program, and just immersed in the world of yoga, and in a really in-depth way, where I was taught the ins and outs of why yoga actually helps. And it's all about the nervous system. So what I learned while I was there is that our nervous system has, two phases. We have the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system is that fight or flight mode. So when we are stressed, our body reacts in a physiological response to that stress, and things start to change. So we start to have stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline start running through our bodies. We have our heart rate starts to speed up, because if we're in danger, we either need to fight something off or run away. Our breath starts to shorten and become rapid, because if you're running, you need to be able to have oxygenated muscles. And speaking of the muscles, your muscles start to tense up, because you're either going to have to run or you're going to have to fight. And energy that usually goes to digestion and to your immune system actually starts to redistribute itself to these other things, because if you're in danger, you need to be able to defend yourself or run away. But the whole thing with this is that our bodies cannot tell the difference between, oh my goodness, there's a lion in front of me that's going to eat me, and oh my goodness, I'm so stressed out, I'm so anxious, I'm worried about this, I'm worried about this person. It can't tell the difference between a physical threat and a psychological threat. So when we have anxiety, stress, trauma that causes mental stress, our body reacts as if there is a physical danger. And over time, we become chronically stressed, and we actually get stuck in this stress response. So even when we're just sitting at home, watching Netflix, eating dinner, our body is still pumping cortisol. It's still in this heightened state. And it causes trouble sleeping, it causes trouble with digestion, it makes our immune system lower. And over time, we actually start to develop illness and disease, because our body is stuck in this stress response. So that is, believe it or not, the majority of Americans, especially because we live in this overstimulated environment. We're overworked, we're tired, we're traumatized, and we're just trying to keep going without taking a moment to be able to sit back and look at ourselves, and to be able to start to find the root of some of these issues. So the reason why yoga, which is a 5,000 plus year tradition, is so helpful is because it goes right to the root of so many of our issues, which is the nervous system. And it helps us to transition from the fight or flight response to the rest and digest response, the parasympathetic nervous system. So in an ideal world, we would be functioning from the parasympathetic nervous system most of the time. But because of our overstimulated lives, and just our day-to-day traumas that we're carrying with us still from childhood, usually we aren't actually in that response. So The parasympathetic nervous system, or the rest and digest response, is actually the nervous system is in an equilibrium, our digestion is flowing properly, our breath is deep and diaphragmatic. So there's a muscle called the diaphragm that's located right under your rib cage. And that is the muscle that actually brings the breath into the lungs. So it almost looks like an upside down bowl. And when you take a deep breath in, it expands, the belly comes out. And then on the exhale, the belly comes back in and it relaxes. But in that fight or flight response, we end up developing irregular patterns of breathing. So if you are more of a chest breather, where when you breathe, you feel it more up here, or sometimes it's even a reverse breath where when you breathe in, your belly actually goes in, and then when you breathe out, it goes out. And the issue with this irregular breathing is that it's constantly triggering your nervous system that you're in danger. So just the way that we breathe, if you find yourself holding your breath, or just shallow breathing, or all of a sudden you realize, whoa, I haven't like taken a breath in like a minute, what is going on? It's because your body is in that irregular breathing, in that stress state. And emotional breathing happens when our emotions and thoughts get coupled with our breathing patterns. So you may not even realize it, but the way we breathe is actually triggering our nervous system to continue to pump out this stress hormones, to continue to make those muscles tense and produce those chemicals that make us, heightened and tensed up to either fight something off or run away. So yoga asana means a posture. So believe it or not, yoga, there's 8 limbs of yoga, and the postures are just one of them. But I'm just going to talk about a few of the limbs today, which are the asana poses, pranayama, which is the breath, and then the meditation aspect. So when you move your body in alignment with deep diaphragmatic breath, it does something wonderful, which it actually stimulates. There's a nerve in your body called the vagus nerve, and it runs from your brain all the way down through your organs and intestines and things like that. And that nerve, specifically when stimulated in a positive way by deep breathing, triggers that parasympathetic nervous system response back into rest and digest. I call it like biohacking the body. So literally just using your breath and your attention and moving in alignment with the breath can cause your body to go back into that rest or digest. So yoga couples movement of the body and the breath to bring your body back into a state of equilibrium and start to heal the nervous system, because you can imagine all the stress and trauma in the body. If you ever feel just like one raw nerve, have you ever just been like, if somebody says one more thing to me?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's because your nervous system has just been overstimulated. So when people say they have a nervous breakdown, which is what happened to me as a kid and why I ended up in the hospitals, my nervous system just had so much that it was like, no more.
Right.
And you pretty much just break because you can't take any more physical, mental, or emotional stress, And
right.
It's so difficult in our society because, people are so easily deemed as like crazy, or like, oh, they just, losing it, or they can't handle their, you know what I mean? When it's not that. It's just we literally can only deal with so much outside and internal stress before the nervous system literally shorts out. So through my education in yoga, I got so interested in this and helped my own body and nervous system and mind and everything come much closer to a state of equilibrium. And my spirituality as well, which to me, spirituality is just a belief in something higher and that things have purpose. You know what I mean? Has helped me really see the world, myself, and the lives of others in a way that doesn't just automatically turn into like a life is cruel situation, because I think that's a big way of how I felt, you know, about my dad's situation and my mom's situation and just all the pain that they had to suffer as good people. But now I'm able to like pull back and look at things from a higher perspective. And like we said in the beginning, you know, and I was born, like that's something beautiful that came out of a trauma, you know, and like my dad's strength and his ability to help others, and you know, his understanding of other people's pain allows him to be an inspiration for others. And I started to see that there's dark and light in everything, and that's okay, and that's beautiful, because we live in this dualistic world where, you know, to experience the highest peaks, you have to also understand the lowest valleys. So as a person that has suffered a lot of trauma myself, when I work with my clients that have also experienced a lot of trauma, something I say is, oh my goodness, you know, this is so valid. You know, your emotions are so valid. Your experiences have been so traumatic. And that definitely is true. And what also is true, that because you've experienced this much pain, you have the ability to experience the same intensity of joy and happiness and light if you can transmute and see the wisdom and the light that resides in your trauma. And that's hard when you're in pain to hear that, because a lot of the times it's like, how can there be anything positive in this situation? But being able to find that truly is like the medicine in that will heal you, and it's going to look different for everyone, you know. But there's a concept called the wounded healer, and in that concept, the message is that inside your own wound, you find the medicine to heal yourself. And once you learn what that medicine is, it becomes medicine that you have to offer the world. So I feel like through my experiences with trauma and suffering and pain and finding what worked for me, it's my duty to now kind of share that with others. So I was living at the ashram, like I said, for about 2.5 years. And I was finding so much relief to a lot of my suffering. I was learning so much. I was making friends. And the universe decided that it wanted to kind of throw another curveball or lesson in for me. So in 2020, my partner Dan, that I had talked about, he also had become a yoga teacher. He didn't live at the ashram with me, but I would travel to see him every weekend. And he got his yoga training through the same ashram during like a 23-day intensive course. So he was on the path as well. And I went to visit him. It was actually around this time of year in 2020. And he was just very, very ill, and something was very wrong. So I ended up rushing him to the hospital, and they did a bunch of tests. And to our surprise, the doctors came back and said, Daniel, you have stage 4 metastatic cancer, and it's one of the rarest cancers in the world. And we're so sorry. So that was like a huge, like another kind of slap in the face. So Daniel had been sick for a while, but nothing super dramatic to the point where we ever would have thought it was something this severe. We believed it was Lyme's disease, which he did have, and a lot of his symptoms were very common with Lyme's disease. So the cancer that he ended up having is called adrenal cortical carcinoma, which is an adrenal cancer. And it's 1 in like 2 million people that get this cancer, which is very, very small odds. So when you can think about that, there's only about 200 people in the US that may get this a year. And with this unique cancer, it doesn't really show any symptoms until it's already spread throughout your whole body.
Wow.
Yeah, so the problem with that is that by the time people are diagnosed with it, they're so late term that they can't even get treatment options. Like if you get breast cancer or pancreatic cancer, they have a protocol of, okay, these are the
Right.
medications. But because this is so rare and they don't get to treat people long enough, there literally isn't even a protocol for this. So, we were in a hospital up here in Pennsylvania, and no one in a hospital in this state had actually even had a patient that had this. The closest one was in Rochester, New York. So we had the option to either transfer him to New York or to keep him where he was and just have them work in tandem with this other hospital. And we decided to stay where we were just because it was closer to home, closer to family. And they were actually allowing me to stay there with him, which it was the middle of the pandemic. And we knew if we went to New York, that wasn't going to happen. We were lucky that we were in a smaller town where the cases were lower. And, the hospital just truly understood how rare and traumatic that this was. He was only 31 years old, so he was diagnosed in July, and then he passed away by September. So it was a very, very fast progression of the cancer. But through that process, as difficult as it was, we had some of the most beautiful and enlightening moments of our lives. And it changed my life forever, my view of life, my view of death, my view of strength, and how to be actually present. Daniel was just the most beautiful light and warrior, and like every doctor that came in, he gave them chills because he had a smile on his face, and he shook their hand, and he was so grateful for everyone to be there, and he made friends. And even though he was so sick and going through so much, he still was able to shine his light, and he didn't let it turn him bitter. And I just was able to be alongside that and be kind of his rock through all of that. And being with someone when they pass away is, I feel like, the biggest honor that you can have for someone. And when he passed away, it was extremely heartbreaking for me. And the amount of grief that I still carry is, unmeasurable. But what is also true, because there's this duality factor, is that experience opened me up to even higher understanding and higher belief, and not just a belief, but a knowing of how the world works, and how we have this unshakable inner strength inside of us that we can call upon if we can choose to be present in the moment and to be present with what is, no matter how difficult or traumatic or heartbreaking it is. There was one day that Daniel went outside, and he was actively dying, and we knew that. And he was just looking at the sky, and he said something along the lines like, man, like, I know what is happening to me, but the sky has never looked as beautiful as it does right now. And that was because he knew in that it wouldn't be there much longer for him to see. And there was just so many moments that he had like that it was like, man, this is the worst thing in the world, but there's the most beauty possible because this is the worst thing in the world. And it just changed my whole understanding of everything. And after he passed, I had so many experiences, messages and signs and symbols and things coming through that so many other people witnessed, that were just, it changed all of our lives and understanding of there is something beyond this life. I don't know how exactly it works, but we do still stay connected to the souls that cross, and we will see them again. And that, again, it was like, I've had these moments in my life that it's just like you say, like mind blown. type of
Yeah.
moments. And that happened, and I continue to go through this deep, deep grief. And at the same time, I continue to go through this deep, deep expansion of what I would say is my consciousness and my awareness. And I just look at everything that, I'm not afraid to die anymore, which is like, I feel like the biggest gift that anyone could ever give you, because when you don't fear death, everything feels so much lighter. Um, and I also understand that everything I do in this life, every moment, every connection, every conversation is so purposeful. And we have the ability to change other people's lives just by existing. Like, we don't even have to do anything. We can just be ourselves and connect and share with each other. So after this happened, I walked and stepped even more into my role of what I call myself is more of a guide, like a guide to bringing people back to the truth that they are and the light that they are. Before all of this conditioning or trauma kind of painted the world for us, because as children, we see the world, we're fearless. Kids aren't afraid of anything. They're not afraid of death. They're not afraid of anything, because they're just existing and they're seeing everything as it is. And that is the goal of what I feel life and what is taught in yoga, is that you're trying to come back to that state of just existing as it is and looking at the world for what it is instead of what you wish it would be or what you wish it was. And understanding that suffering is part of life. And actually, through healing that suffering that we have and working on healing the nervous system and getting our bodies back into a state of equilibrium, which really just is coming into the present moment. Because when we go through trauma and then we're having those reoccurring thoughts or reoccurring anxieties, you think about it, you have your physical body, you have your mental body, which is your thoughts, and then you have your emotional body, your feelings. When you are physically here, but your mind is 5 years ago and your emotion is 5 years ago, it actually splits you. You're no longer in the present moment, which causes all of these malfunctions in your system, your nervous system, and everything like that. So when you're able to come back to this moment by bringing your awareness and focus and presence to the here and now, it just automatically starts to heal and equalize these processes in the body. So trailing back to the root of your traumas is really necessary as well for healing. They call it shadow work. I'm sure you may have heard that word.
Yes, yes.
And it's really just meaning where, when people come to me and they say, I'm dealing with this anxiety, I have this huge fear of like failure, or I just really feel like I'm worthless or that I'm not good enough, I usually say, like, when was the first time you ever felt that way? Right? And we trail it back to that moment. And then we work on healing, identifying, healing that moment by bringing awareness to it, because without awareness there, you're not able to really do anything. So once we bring awareness to that root point and then begin to work through that by offering, usually it's in childhood, sometimes it's in adulthood too, start offering whatever we needed at that point. They call it healing the inner child. As adults, we have to give ourselves that love and reassurance and safety that we may have not gotten in certain situations. And it brings so much more awareness to why we act the way we do now, and slowly start to become more aware of your responses in life rather than your reaction. So these triggers that we have, something happens and you're triggered, is because it made you feel like when the first time it happened. So once you have that awareness in that present moment, there starts to become a space that begins to happen. So something happens in life, and before you just react, there's like a moment. And you might still react, but then the next time there's a little bit more of a moment, a little bit more of a moment, and you start to have a choice in how you actually respond in your life. And that starts to heal these neural pathways in the brain. It starts to heal the nervous system and create new patterns, because we are biological machines. So we're programmed in childhood, especially, just like a computer. And it's like reworking those things. So what's beautiful about energy work, which is where we get into the Reiki and the sound healing, is that it can penetrate all of the layers of the body. So we talked about the physical layer, the mental layer, emotional layer, and then the energetic layer is pretty much the response of all those things dancing together, because everything in life is vibration. That's science. So Reiki and sound healing are able to bring that healing energy into all the layers of the body. So how my sessions usually go is I have my clients get into a very relaxed state. I usually walk them through a guided relaxation first, just to bring themselves into that calm state. Because if you're not in a calm state, then you're not going to be able to really heal or process anything. So once I'm able to get them into that calmed nervous systematic response, I use a combination of sound, different frequencies and instruments that are proven to have responses on the brain, and vibration can travel through the body and help, energy that may get locked in there released. So thoughts and emotions are also energy. And a lot of the times when we have chronic pain, like I did I still do, I'm not 100%, but that's part of my path continuously, is emotions and grief and trauma. Those energies get stuck in the physical body. And then that's why we start to develop some of these chronic pain issues or chronic diseases. It's not the only reason. Obviously, there's physical injury and genetics, but that can happen. So sound healing can actually move those energies so that you can have an emotional release or have an energetic release. And a lot of times people will have like a physical response or an emotional response. They'll feel much lighter after these treatments. They'll have, dreams or memories and things start to pop up, because it pretty much just moves some of the energy that may be stuck there. And Reiki healing is actually an old Japanese style of energy healing. So I'm sure you've heard of, prana or chi, you know what I mean? Tai chi.
Yeah.
See that
Right.
So that is just life force energy. So the idea is that we all are alive because there is this energy that is permeating through all things. And what's really cool is that we have the ability to manipulate that energy. Everybody does. And so what Reiki practitioners do is just they are taught to have more of an awareness of this energy. And I'm not, putting my hands on someone and like giving them my energy and healing them. That's not actually what's happening. I just turn into like a flute or an instrument that just channels the energy in that's already there and just helps to put it into an intended place. So it's the same thing as prayer, because anywhere that you put your awareness and your intention, energy flows. So that's why when we have negative thoughts, our awareness and our intentions are going there, and they say that manifests, negative things in your life, or you have negative experiences. It's just because energy flows where the focus goes. So Reiki is just taking your awareness and intention and having that be into an area of the body, or however you're working on a person. And it just helps to clear stagnant energy that's there, so that nourishing and new energies can come in. We always say we're stuck in the past. We're stuck in the past. It's actually more the past is stuck in us. That's how I try to explain it. Because we're physically here, but those energies may just be so saturated in our mental body and emotional body that they're manifesting in the physical. And I know this may be kind of like lofty or esoteric for a lot of people, but if you look into like the koshas or the layers of the body, that's taught in, yoga and Ayurveda, which is an ancient Indian medical practice. This is very well known in a lot of the Eastern countries. And I am a firm believer of bringing Western and Eastern medicine together. And that is the key of really healing humanity, because there is so much wisdom and resources in both. And when they're paired together is when you kind of hit all sides of the spectrum and we're able to heal and transcend through these situations that we go through. So I know that was probably a lot.
I wish I was taking notes, honestly.
It's recorded, so.
I'm going to have to go back and watch the video. Okay, listen, I'm blown away by how much work you've done on yourself. That's a lot of work. One of the messages of that, in that journey, is that it does take time and it takes some effort, but it's definitely possible to heal, regardless of what happens in your life. And you also touched on a lot of different things that I also talk about in some of my other podcasts. So there was a lot of dovetailing with the other lessons and tools that I've taught people as well. So it complements my other episodes too, which is nice. And, you're absolutely right in the sense of what we focus our mind on is what's going to be exponentially more likely to happen. And really, the only two things in life we have control over is what we focus our mind on and how we choose to react to situations. You are absolutely right. If your fight or flight response, if your sympathetic nervous system has been activated, you cannot think logically or rationally, because the circuitry between your downstairs brain, your amygdala, your fight or flight response, your upstairs brain, your logical rational mind, and what will help is cut off. Because if a line is running towards us and we sit there and think, it's 50 feet away, it can run 5 miles an hour, I can run 2 miles an hour, you think, you die. That's why we can't think when we're adrenalized. And you're absolutely right. The mind does not know, the body does not know the difference between adrenaline that's good, like exciting, like a roller coaster, or if it's trauma, if it's danger, or if it's a false alarm and you've just been triggered and you're not really in danger, but it reminds your mind of another time where you were traumatized in that situation. And the first matter of order is always going to be to calm your body down, with breath work, with progressive muscle relaxation, with meditation, with Reiki, whatever works for people. I talk about the 5 senses. I love that you integrated a discussion about mindfulness into your presentation, because when we are right here and right now, we're not out here in the future, which is anxiety and fear. We're not back here in the past, which might be regret and depression, okay? We're right here, right now. And it's like living life in Technicolor, because you start noticing all these things in your environment that you have never maybe noticed before, because you're up here in your head, you're out here in the future, or you're overanalyzing things. And one of my favorite parts about, Eastern practices is being present, being mindful, getting our rational, logical mind back on board, back online, because we've calmed our body down. So there is a lot that can be done with people like you, people like me, other folks that can practice some of these skills to help you to be present, because it really does make a huge difference. It releases serotonin in the brain, and some of these things are even more effective than pharmaceuticals. So, it is really great that you were here today to describe the things that you have found to be helpful, part of your journey, how you grew from that. And, I hope I don't cry when I say this, but I'm very moved by your story. And I appreciate your willingness to share that with the audience. You are really a shining example of how people can grow and get stronger as a result of their trauma. And I don't know if you're like me or if this resonates with you, but when I look back on the difficult times that I've had in my life and the trauma that I've experienced, I look at it now from the perspective of, that's when I found out what a badass I was, or am, rather. That was when I found out that, that I could get through really difficult times, maybe that other people may have had a much harder time with. And I can recognize the growth that I've experienced too, because maybe like something that happens to me now would have had a different effect on me 5 years ago when I was less skillful than I am today, and when we go through this adversity, we can take stock of where we're at, and we can recognize, like, wow, I was able to use these skills automatically, and that means the brain change has happened. Those skills have become our new automatic response because we've created a new neural pathway. Yeah. And it feels good to recognize that, because it gives us hope that we're going to continue to do okay, and we're going to be able to weather the storms that we might encounter in the future. So, I guess that's the last message I have for people, is to just stick with it. It's like doing reps with weights. When you practice the skills, it creates new neural pathways. And if you do it enough, after about 6 months, which sounds like a long time, but it's not, practice it again and again for 6 months is usually when the brain change happens. And then it becomes more of an automatic response for you. That's not to say that, if you're under a lot of stress and your body is compromised in some way because you're sick, or because you're exhausted, or because your brain is bathed in adrenaline and cortisol because you've been stressed out, that you can do things to get grounded, you can do things to get back into your body and get through it, and it is definitely possible.
And it might be different for everyone, what that skill or that tool is. Yoga might not work for everyone. Sometimes it's dancing. Sometimes it's going out in nature. Nature, that's one thing I didn't mention. Nature was such a huge, huge healing thing for me after the loss of my partner, because, losing the one thing that engulfed you in love and safety so suddenly, the only thing that really gave me that same sensation was the forest. It was nature. Physically it grounds us down, through vibrations of the earth and stuff too. And like that, I love that you said, like, just keep trying and keep going, because there are so many moments, especially as a child. And I feel like it's even harder as like a teenager, because it just seems like things will never get better, because you may not know any better, So I'm just so grateful that I didn't, give up completely. There always was this spark, of keep going. And I honestly think I learned that from my dad, because I saw him, and there are so many moments that I would just be looking at myself and being like, how can I be like so hopeless when like my dad, was able to overcome something, so, and it, we always can find someone in our lives that we can look up to in that sense. And that's why it's so beautiful that you're doing this podcast, because it gives people real examples, and if I have any message to anyone, it's just not to give up. And that it does take time, but once you get a taste of peace,
Yes.
you're like, if you just try, and it might not stick, for long, it might be a minute, 2 minutes of like, once you feel it, you're not going to want to stop chasing after that and seeking that. And once it's not like I don't ever get stressed. It's not like I don't ever have those moments where I slip back into old patterns, but I know tools to bring me back out. And I trust that even in those moments where I don't feel well, there's purpose to that, and there's lessons, and there's things to be learned, and it's okay to not be okay. In our culture, I think we're so afraid of not feeling good and not experiencing just pure bliss and joy all the time. But we suffer for a reason, and there's growth and lessons and wisdom and so much that can be found in that. So even when you're just feeling like complete crap, like, see if you can be present with that and be like, okay, I feel horrible. Okay, I do. Like, I'm going to be here with that for a few moments, instead of just being like, I don't want to feel like this. I don't want to feel like this, or numbing it out with something.
Right.
Because emotions, like, once they will just want to be felt. And once it's felt, it actually can give you that opportunity to, let go. And if you don't have, the ability at that moment to deal with it yourself, then ask for help. That's another big thing. Don't feel like, I had so much help through this. I had a community of people. I had friends, resources, my spirituality, nature. Like, reach out for help if and when you need it. You don't have to go through it alone. And you're not the only person, that feels, like life is difficult. So just keep going.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks again for, sharing your story, and which was very inspirational as well. So thank you. And if you heard something that Kailin talked about today that you'd like to learn more about, including the services that she provides to help people heal, I'm going to leave her website and her email address in the description of the podcast. And you can reach out to her if you are interested in doing that. So thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And I think that a lot of people are going to really be inspired by your story too. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, take care.